Aristotle told us that not only is happiness a state of being, but so is excellence. And this makes sense, remember, because he wants happiness and excellence to be the same sort of thing, or maybe even the exact same thing for human beings. So we need to figure out how to get into this state of being. What is it that gets us to be happy/excellent? Well, we know it's all about being the means between extremes. So when it comes to fear, we need to be courageous and not cowardly or rash. When it comes to money, we need to be liberal instead of miserly or goofy, spending too much. When it comes to honor, we need to have justified or proper pride instead of being too proud or arrogant or too modest. So we've asked the question, how should we act? We should always aim, as a rule, at the mean between two bad extremes. This sounds great, right? But it also assumes we can always find the sort of Goldilocks, just right solution. Well, what if we can't get there? Aristotle thinks that we can still figure out what sorts of things we ought to do. We should lean toward the extreme that is less bad. So if we go back to the fear example, right, maybe it's a little bit better to be too brave, to be a little bit brash, than to be too cowardly, to be a total wimp. So if you can't pull off perfect courage, maybe you should lean a little bit toward being overly bold, overly courageous, instead of not quite enough. He also warns us we should be careful to avoid whatever seems most pleasurable, because, obviously, we tend toward too much pleasure rather than too much pain. Duh. Right, we like pleasure a lot more than pain. So it might seem like it's a better idea to be too cowardly, right? Maybe it's more pleasurable to hide under a blanket than it is to go, storming into the closet and make sure there's no monsters there. Well, he thinks maybe that's not the case because pleasure is sort of deceptive. We like pleasure more than we really should. So it comes down to, ideally, we want the mean between extremes. If we can't find that, we should prefer the extreme that seems less bad. But we need to remember when we're considering what seems less bad, that pleasure seems more important to us than pain, and it's really not, he thinks. They should be treated pretty much equally. So when it comes down to it, remember, Aristotle's writing to help legislators primarily, but we as the citizens can also figure out from this how we ought to live, what sorts of happy, excellent lives we should carry out. Happiness, we know, is a state of being, and it arises from living a good life, an excellent life, and doing good things. Excellence, we know, is a state that's just like happiness, and so we want to sort of achieve this paired state. We want to live really good lives. The good life and good things are excellent, and these come out of a well-developed rational part of the soul. This means that we need to find the mean not only for things like courage, but also for things like education, for knowledge or wisdom. And we know that the excellent things are the means and the middles. So, Aristotle is going to conclude in Book 2, the legislator needs to create good laws to encourage good, moderate activities. That will help the citizens become excellent and happy. Now, Nicomachean goes on for 8 more books. It's really quite long, and a lot more happens. We're not going to talk about that. I think what we've read roughly corresponds to what happened in the Republic. So the best thing to think about this week is how it compares. Some things you might post on could include whether you think Aristotle gets more right than Plato or less right. You might think about where he agrees and disagrees with Plato on various things. We know he's got a different view on the unity of happiness, whether there's one happiness or many. Or you might look at places where he agrees with Plato and Socrates and look at why he agrees, whether you agree with both of them or whether you disagree with both, and why that could be. So this will be our last week of the first sort of unit of the course, looking at the ancient Greeks. We're going to move on next week, and that also means that there will be a paper due at the end of, not this week, but next week, dealing with the Greeks. So also take a look at that paper assignment. Read through it. It'll be on the Greeks. You'll have a couple of options. So also think about doing some reading back into the stuff we've done previously and get working on that paper. As always, email me with questions, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say on the discussion board.